and welcome to the Hero Report podcast. My name is Ari Cohen. I am a professor of political science at the University of Nebraska, and with me, as always, my friend from Michigan, Matt Langdon of the Hero Construction Company. How are you, Matt?
I'm well, thank you. It's been a couple of weeks, so it's good to get back in the saddle.
Yeah, I had planned to talk with you earlier this week, but I contracted some sort of horrifying virus that had me sleeping pretty much all day on Monday and half the day on Tuesday. But I'm pleased to say that my body has returned its normal vim and vigor, and I am now ready to talk. And I'm glad, actually, that we waited this long because we have a big story to talk about here today.
We do. It's and it seems to just continue to develop with this story of Ed Snowden, the NSA whistleblower. And I think the story, I mean, there's certainly the story there on his actions and what he did, but there's a story about what people's reactions are too.
Yeah.
I think we can get into.
Yeah, you know, and I wrote a little bit about this on my blog yesterday, and I think it's really worth talking about the reaction. I think that a lot of people, we can talk about the story itself for just a minute, but I think a lot of people are probably at this point pretty well aware of what happened. That is leaking, Snowden leaking a bunch of material on the NSA to The Guardian and The Post, if I'm not misremembering, and in some sense exposing the results of what appears, essentially to be a legal program of surveillance on Americans. Right? And so there's been a ton of discussion as a result about whether this is leaking or whistleblowing, whether this is heroism or being a traitor. And of course, since the story has not a whole lot of new information, yesterday already we started talking about his girlfriend and that she's pretty, and the media, the usual media circus where we have to talk about something but there's nothing new to report. So we'll keep we'll make stuff news, or we'll just rehash the same questions over and over again.
Well, I wonder if you said that there's not much point in going over the story because most people are aware of it. I wonder how many people really are aware of it, because what I imagine is that there's not a lot of clarity on what has happened here. I certainly don't see it coming across Facebook at all. I've seen 2 people post anything about it, and I'm talking to one of them. It just doesn't seem to be. It hasn't become newsworthy, so I think that there is something to say about, and I think you covered it. But it is curious to me that what some people are saying is a massive event just doesn't seem to have much awareness. I think I could walk downtown here and ask people what they thought about Ed Snowden, and I don't imagine that I'd meet anybody who could respond knowledgeably, even acknowledging.
Isn't that always going to be true? I mean, I think that's always going to be the case, right? If you take any sort of kind of political story, some people are going to care a lot about it, and most people aren't going to even notice it. Yeah. I think that especially when you're not in an election year and it's middle of the summer or all the, I just think that there's not going to be a lot of action around a story like this. I don't know. Maybe I'm sort of naive. I mean, of course, in the circles that I travel in, everybody's talking about it nonstop, right? There's nothing else to talk about. So all the people that I follow on Twitter have talked about it for 2 solid days. I was in a complete fever haze, and I heard all about it. For me, I mean, I'm seeing a lot about it, but I think that if I was less of an academic who studied politics and international affairs, I think that, my high school classmates perhaps aren't spending as much time on this story.
Yeah, and I think ultimately the way I understand the story to have gone is this guy was being exposed to lots of evidence that the government was widely recording everything that everyone does in to do with electronic communication, and just got to the point where he decided that he needed to do something about it because nobody else was. And the Guardian interview with him on video, it just struck me how clear he was about what he had done and the risks in what he had done. So when we talk about heroism being taking action for the good of others despite a risk or sacrifice, he fits that definition quite well, classically almost, and he expressed awareness that he was going to be in a bad place. He had given up his comfortable life, his good-looking girlfriend, his big salary, his life in Hawaii, because he believed so strongly in it. And it just baffles me that there is such a strong siding against him. And I made a comment the other day on Facebook about how the easiest headline in journalism at the moment is hero or traitor. And it just, even today, I get a Google alert on hero, searches for the word hero, and it's flooded with that. It's the same headline over and over again.
Right.
It baffles me that there is such a division over this guy, and maybe that's what journalism is to create a story out of nothing.
Well, sure. I mean, the thing that I noticed right away, the New York Times has this room for debate section, right? And that's precisely what they want to do, right? The idea is, let's lay out all the different angles of this story, and we'll have experts weigh in, and then the people who read this can decide what they find most compelling, right? So we'll have someone who argues that he's a whistleblower and deserves protection under the law. We'll have someone who argues that he's not a whistleblower and he should be prosecuted. We'll have someone who argues that this is, traitorous behavior, and we'll have someone who argues that this is the pinnacle of heroism. And that's objectivity, right? That's all the possible angles to the story, and then readers can read this and see what they find most compelling. And the thing that's fascinating is, like, each one is like 300 words, right? So, you've carved out your 300 or 400 words, and you're good to go. I don't know. I find the whole thing as mysterious as you do. I think you and I went back and forth a bit on this, as we sometimes do, tongue-in-cheek, on Facebook in the comments on my blog post or something like that. And I'll repeat here because nobody saw that. I think this idea that we should throw the book at whistleblowers is so, like, anathema to the whole concept of doing the right thing and of fighting the war on terror and so on and so forth, right? You can't hold to the notion that if you see something suspicious, you should say something, and then on the other hand, say we need to throw the book at people who saw something suspicious and said something, right?
And I think that cuts. Yeah, that cuts right to it. I mean, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And there's all this. There are arguments about that he's risked American lives over this, which is baffling. I mean, apart from his own life, I don't see that being the case.
Right.
There's the idea that he should have gone through the proper channels, as though that works anywhere. That's such an established fallacy in whistleblower history. I mean,
right. Well, and not to mention that we're dealing with the NSA, right? I mean, right. Like, it's one thing, if maybe we could even say, like, if there's a corporate whistleblowing, maybe now there are I don't know, right? Maybe in some corporations they have really well-established procedures or whatever. But the truth of the matter is even without getting into the specifics, right? And that's why I didn't spend very much time, talking about the case and what he, what he blew the whistle on and what documents, and because we don't know, right? There may be more stuff that he hasn't released, that he's holding in reserve. I mean, we don't know. The main point is that the attitude where you say, this thing that I see goes against the very principles that our government is supposed to uphold, and our government is doing it, the right thing to do, regardless of the cost to me, which will undoubtedly be tremendous, is to make this public. That has to be something we encourage, right? It cannot be something where we say, well, on a case-by-case basis, we'll decide whether we encourage it, right? Yeah. If the information is not sensitive, then we'll encourage it. If the abuse is not, if the abuse hasn't been democratically sanctioned in some way, then we'll allow it. I just think we have to either say to people, we want you to always do the right thing, or we have to say to people, it's okay not to do the right thing.
Right.
But we know what the right thing is here, right? And that's what I find so unbelievable, is that people are saying out loud, right? People are making this positive argument. They're saying, it's this program is something that we allowed, right? Our legislators put laws into effect that allow spying on us in all manner of ways, especially electronic communications. And then we had judges who signed crazy warrants that said, yeah, feel free to search anything, as far as I can tell. But so that means the government, has sort of done all of the due diligence it needs to do on this program. And so all he's done is blow the whistle on something that was already legal, right? He's notified us of a legal thing, right? And we should just trust our legislators, people have said, right? They know what's good for us. It's good for us to have people spying on us. Because this way, they'll catch the bad guys, and they won't bother the good guys, even though they're spying. And it's the old canard, if you don't have anything to hide, you won't be concerned that people are watching, right? But it seems to me he's exactly right when he says to himself, as he must have, this goes against the entirety, the whole purpose, the spirit of the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. And you can't sit there and have that be part of your job.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I think we're getting into the baffling part of it. So one thing that's interesting to me is one of the first efforts was to discredit him as a person. Right. And I think there's a lot of effort to put him into the same category as Bradley Manning and also Julian Assange, who are two very different cases, I think. That yes. Manning released a lot of stuff without going through it and making a lot of efforts to make sure everything was safe to be released or whatever.
It was a data dump.
Yeah, and the big, you and I have both read lots of claims that this guy is doing it for egotistical reasons.
Yes, he's narcissistic, which is what you say right. about anybody who's a whistleblower.
Right, and he just, I mean, there's nothing about that interview that spoke of ego, spoke of any efforts to be famous. I mean, it's the worst thing to whistleblow on if you want to become a famous celebrity, right? I mean, he's exiled forever, and really only has a handful of countries in the world that he could live in, and even then, not very happily. Julian Assange, I see. Well, this is an interesting piece too that I was thinking about this morning. I mean, the general consensus is this guy's egotistical, wants the attention, and so then he's discredited. But I wonder personally how much, and that's my assumption too, is that my thought on Julian Assange is that he's egotistical and wants to be the center of attention. But then this morning I thought to myself, well, I think that because that's what I've read and seen. That's not in the press. That's not something that I've seen from him, because I haven't really seen a lot of him.
Well, have you watched his internet TV show?
I have not. I have not.
If you would like to support that idea on your own without the press, there's a clip of it where he's having an interview with Slavoj Žižek. I highly recommend it.
Okay.
That's all I'll say about that.
Right, and I'm not. By no means am I saying that he's not the attention grabber.
Yeah.
But I realized myself that clearly this came from the press. My impression of what he is came from the press, and that's what's happening here. Is we've got people saying he. I mean, I read another article today that he was clearly a socially inept person, and the product of our society going wrong, and et cetera, et cetera.
But on the other hand, he has the attractive girlfriend who's a dancer.
Right, right. So he can't be messed up too much, right? It's just, it is really concerning. And the other story that came out this week that is, I haven't seen mentioned very much either, is that the anonymous guy that basically got the Steubenville rape case in the public eye is being charged for hacking and whatever it might be. And so here again is a whistleblower, someone who brought out an injustice, is potentially going to jail for longer than the rapists. And it's another character assassination. It's another, we had an episode on the Steubenville rape issue, and it's that people defend people who are doing bad things. It happens over and over again. And this, I think the other thing we said on Facebook is it's this tattletale culture, this from kindergarten, where you don't tell people when someone's doing something wrong, and that's so ingrained. And yet, as you said before, there's the famous campaign of if you see something, say something, and they're completely contradictory. Right. And yet, that's the culture. We really are in a culture of if you tell someone something someone's doing something bad, then shame on you.
It's the funny thing. Like, I was thinking about this just a couple weeks ago when I actually taught my son to be a tattletale. I specifically told him to be a tattletale. I didn't use that word because it's got all these very negative connotations. But there were some big kids at school who were doing things that he knew that it was not right for them to do, because at home, if he did it, he would get in trouble, right? And I said, if they do that and it's bothering you, and that then you should go and tell one of your teachers, right? They shouldn't be doing those things. It could hurt somebody, right? And he said, that's right. So every morning on the way to school, he said, well, if the big kids are doing these things that aren't right, I should tell my teachers. That you could tell any teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what else to do. I cannot say this more loudly or clearly. There cannot be a problem with saying this is a wrong thing. Don't do it. Right?
Yeah.
If you're powerless, if you're someone who doesn't have power, like my 3-year-old or a random contractor in a giant governmental machine, then you have to turn to an authority. You have to make it public. You have to take it to people who have more power. I don't know how to be any clearer about that. I don't understand why anybody could think that this is the wrong behavior, that the best thing to do is swallow what you think is right. I can't get my head around that.
Right, and that's it. That's if you feel that something is wrong, you need to do something about it. That's your obligation as a person. We've talked about this a lot, and it's part of the bystander issue, that people are unsure that something's 100%. I'm not 100% sure that this is wrong, so I'm not going to do anything about it. And it's creating a culture where people are scared to say something.
Right. And I have to say too, I think the important thing that we're talking about here is words and not actions, right? I think that there's a real key here, right? And I think that's really important for the Snowden case. Perhaps if we juxtapose it against the Manning case, right? Because the Manning case was really an indiscriminate kind of data dump, and it went to Julian Assange rather than to journalists. There really wasn't any. There really wasn't any check, right? So the potential for someone in the field to be injured existed. Yeah, it just existed. I don't know whether anybody was compromised. I don't know if there were any. I don't know whether it happened, but there is the possibility. In this case, right, that doesn't seem to have happened or to exist as a possibility of happening, right? There's nobody being named. There's no. It's very clear that the journalists are being responsible with what they've been given, as journalists are. I think it's a very, very different case. And I also think that when we say if you see something, say something, or if you know that something is wrong, tell someone about it, right? That's very different from do something about it. Yeah, it seems to me that there's a danger zone there where someone could say this thing is wrong and I'm going to go do something, right? Because that's where people can get hurt. Yeah, you could talk yourself into injuring people to do the right thing that you think is the right thing.
Yep.
But I think there's a clear obligation, as you say, to say things, right? To take information and make it public, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think in every case you have to decide what the appropriate action is yourself. And it's absurd that people think that it seems a lot of these articles are written from the perspective of living in a utopia where clearly if you see something wrong, you just put it up the channels and it'll be taken care of. And that's just simply not the case. And I remember sitting through numerous new employee meetings where I used to work, and it was expressed very clearly: if something feels wrong, you need to communicate it to your superior. If they don't do anything about it, you go above them, and if they don't do it, etc. So I mean, it's clear in common practice that it just doesn't work to just hand it off to somebody and walk away.
Right.
And that seems to be the very clear message that this guy had. Was I waited for Obama to be elected and change things. He didn't. I waited and we don't really know who he told, if he told anyone what his concerns were. But eventually he looked at the situation and said the only way that this is going to change is if many people are made aware of it. And that's when you said to speak to someone in power or in authority. The public is the one that has the power here to make the change. And as this idea that everyone in the US signed off on this and said, "Yep, go ahead." That there was a referendum on, "Hey, just go ahead and record everything, will be fine." The idea that is the same thing as electing people is ridiculous.
No, I don't know. I just think it's some sort of the idea is that basically we're supposed to trust our elected representatives because we trust in the system, and over time the system corrects itself to do what the people want. Instead, we have an unelected 29-year-old, doing what he thinks is right. But the truth is, there are times when what you need is one person with a moral compass.
Right.
Just because a majority chooses something doesn't make that thing right. Majoritarianism doesn't give you ethics, right?
Well, right. You look at the civil rights movement, that it would never have happened if the majority ruled and made the decisions, right? Yeah.
So, at bottom, I think that the thing that we're not hearing enough of, right, that all the talk from experts or whatever in the last 2 days has not given us enough of is the perspective of the kind of hero training, right? I mean, what this person did, what Snowden did, was incredibly difficult. Hey, if you have to be a narcissist to do a super hard thing, then maybe we should have more narcissists. I don't know. What I do know is that this was a very risky move. There was an incredible amount of sacrifice, and he's left his life behind, right? Now he'll have to fight extradition, most likely. There's no chance that this guy gets, another shot at doing what it is he'd been doing. Right. And he's not even 30 years old, right? This is your life for the rest of your life. This is the thing that you did. That's a huge move to make because you think it's right. And the truth is, the number of people who say now, oh, I don't think he's correct, right? I think that this huge, monumental invasion of privacy is perfectly appropriate. I mean, there are people saying that, right? That this given the choice, this is what Americans want. We want this. I don't know. I really hope that this does launch a conversation where more people say, you know what, this was, maybe I don't like the way he did it. Maybe I wish there were better channels for him to have used. Maybe I wish those existed. Maybe they did exist and he didn't use them. Whatever, right? I hope the conversation doesn't turn out to be, I don't know, maybe authoritarianism isn't so bad.
Well, right, and it's I don't want to get into this, but it's the amusing aspect of, or the comparison between the Fourth Amendment being pretty bendable and we'll just let it go because of safety, and the Second Amendment is completely inflexible, regardless of what's going on. I saw this crazy story this morning about how 11 toddlers have killed people with guns this year already, and it's baffling.
Yeah, we could have that be a different conversation.
Right.
I could talk about gun violence for hours.
Yeah. The other thing that has been interesting is everyone now is an expert on the definition of the word hero.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So there's all this. It's almost that people they're not even talking about what makes a hero. They're just saying this guy's not a hero. And yet, in the same week, there's been unanimous support for calling this dog in the Philippines a hero because
a great dog, Matt.
Allegedly jumped in front of a motorcycle to block it from killing 2 kids. What a concocted story, feel-good story. But no one's questioning that. No one's questioning, oh yeah, this dog's clearly a hero, sacrificed itself for 2 kids. This guy's intent, and that's probably the core piece of this conversation, is what was his intent. If his intent was to change an injustice, something that he thought was terrible, there's one thing, but people are certainly trying to make it something else. His intent was to, who knows? I just can't even follow that thought path of what his intent could have possibly been otherwise. There is no celebrity potential for this guy in the future. There is no great job coming to him, it's a really bizarre line of thought to say that he could have done it for personal reasons.
Right. No, I mean, if you look at how well whistleblowers have done in the past for themselves, right? I mean, look at how they're doing on the lecture circuit these days.
Well, it always comes down to Daniel Ellsberg, doesn't it? He's the one that he gets quoted on these things, but I mean, he's one of many who did not get the success that he had, or the reputation that he has.
Right.
And I keep going back to thinking about the Steubenville thing, that this guy who brought justice to a case is now going to be prosecuted for spying on people technologically. I mean, what a contradiction. I mean, this guy got into, however he did it, hacking into whatever, and found the truth, and yet the government is given carte blanche to do that. We trust everyone in the government, and that's this guy had said, Snowden, that he could tap anyone's phone anytime, listen in on them, anyone that he wanted anytime.
Right.
And this is a guy that wasn't even working for the government. I mean, he's a contractor.
But that's the thing, right? Isn't it? I mean, every one of these begins with an act of lawbreaking, right? I mean,
right.
And so for people, that's the big hurdle that it seems to me whistleblowers have to overcome, right? With the public or with pundits or with whomever is going to talk about them and their actions. The first thing is always that they've committed a crime. Yeah?
Yeah.
Some law has been broken, and then we have to, I don't know, either forget about that or balance it against what else we think or whatever. And the truth is, so much of it in the end comes down to what you think about their intuition, right? Whether you agree with them or you don't. I guess. I mean, I don't know. I'm sort of hard-pressed. I wonder if I could think of an example of someone who blew the whistle on something and I thought they were wrong. Like, I didn't think it was a problem. But I still think that whistleblowing, that they ought to be commended for whistleblowing. I don't know. Maybe I need to spend some time looking for cases like that. It would be really interesting.
Well, I mean, it doesn't seem like it would ever become a story if they were whistleblowing something that wasn't worth whistleblowing. I don't think we'd ever see it.
Right. But like, if I don't care about privacy, and this guy blows the whistle on all the violations of my privacy, then I'm like, well, stop it. You're giving away, you're giving away this secret that we're spying on everybody, which isn't, I mean, which I guess is not a secret, but, now we know the extent of it. Yeah. Well,
that's another criticism against him is, well, we already knew we were getting spied on. It's like, what? That's not the case. It's not the case that everybody knew that and had signed off on it.
Right.
I think we've talked about law breaking as part of heroism before as well. I just go back to the founding fathers of the US. They were not law-abiding citizens when they did what they needed to do, and there's no question in the world that they did the right thing, right? But I mean, there are all these pieces that people keep throwing up that have precedence in history to have shown that they're irrelevant. They're just not part of the issue, and it's this. I wonder what the reaction would have been if this guy had done what he'd done. If he was a Chinese intelligence specialist and published evidence that the Chinese were attacking, as they have been doing, attacking American companies and American government, trying to break through. If this guy came out and threw it all out on the line and then was killed by or imprisoned by the Chinese government, it would be a completely different story, right?
Yeah, no, he'd be he'd have a streets named after him in this country.
Right. I mean, unquestioned heroism, right?
Yeah, for sure. Just, as heroic as that dog.
Right. Unanimous. Yeah. So I mean, there's that part of it. There's also there's some it's this tattletale thing. There's some problem there, and I keep thinking back to with Bradley Manning's case. This guy has had more punishment, more vilification than the guys in the helicopter of the video that he released killing civilians. I don't even know if those guys have been punished or what happened there. So I'm speaking from ignorance there, but they certainly have not had the punishment that Manning had. And you think about the banking industry, the crimes that have been committed there, and no one's been imprisoned. There's just this kind of like, those guys, you shouldn't be.
Boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. Yeah, I mean, greed's okay. I mean, they screwed up, but we need competition to survive. Or the guys in the helicopter they were in a war zone, so bad luck to the people who were there. And I mean, just this. It seems that to be a tattletale is the highest crime against society.
Yeah, well, and I think part of this, I am almost inclined to say that part of this goes back to sort of the way that we think about things when we're children, the way that our parents or our teachers or whomever kind of train us to think about, the old "I'm telling," right? I do think that there are ways to be a thoughtful or a careful tattletale, and ways that are annoying and it suggests you can't solve your own problems, right? And it's important to delineate between those things. Times when something is wrong and dangerous and has to be addressed by by finding an authority or finding someone with the power to deal with the problem, and times when you should be able to simply handle a situation yourself, using your words and solving a problem, right? I keep going back to lessons with my 3-year-old. I find that it's funny how our national security issues mirror my parenting with a 3-year-old. But it's also interesting how most of our citizens seem not to understand them. If someone takes a toy away from you, you don't have to go tell, right? You talk it over and figure out how you can share, right? But if someone's climbing the back fence and is in danger of going near the street, maybe you have to tell somebody. Maybe you have to get someone to come address that situation. Or if if a group of kids is picking on a smaller kid, maybe you have to find someone to help you address that situation. Those are two very, very different scenarios. If you're the person who always runs and tells, maybe we have a problem, right? But if you're a person who really picks your spot and says, this is a thing that I can't handle on my own and that is really problematic, I have to have assistance. That's the kind of thing we should be encouraging.
Well,
You have to teach people that there's a time when you say, this really demands serious attention. And I have to say something because the consequences of no one saying something are really extreme.
Yeah, and you had sort of said something like that in your blog post about we need to be teaching this to kids. We need to be teaching this behavior to kids. Now, I 100% agree. That's part of what I do. But what examples can we give kids? Let's say older kids, middle school or high school. How do we encourage this idea of whistleblowing or telling someone when there's something wrong, when it's so very hard to find examples where it's been a success and that person has been held up as someone who made a positive difference?
Yeah, that's really the $1 million question, isn't it? Where do we find those really good examples? The truth is, there was a period in time where I think we really kind of hit our stride, where we got excited about whistleblowers, right? Wasn't there a movie about a whistleblower? Haven't there been a number of movies about good whistleblowers?
Russell Crowe with the cigarettes.
Right.
60 Minutes. But even that was
was it Charlize Theron or somebody? Didn't she do a whistleblower movie?
Yep, I think so.
I'm usually Johnny on the spot with pop culture references, but I think I'm still feeling the after effects of my illness. I do think there was a period where we had like 3 or 4 films that came out in a relatively short period of time that kind of celebrated whistleblowing. It was almost entirely corporate, I think.
Yeah, but the Russell Crowe one, and we'll remember the name in a minute, but it was a study of someone whose life was destroyed because they told the truth, and it was destroyed by the corporations. It was destroyed by the person he trusted to tell the story, and it was destroyed by public perception as well. It's a similar story here. It's the media, for whatever reason, doesn't like this, and I wonder if it's is some of it that they're upset that they didn't break the news, they didn't whistleblow, they didn't break the story themselves.
Well, but in this case they did, right? This is all
they didn't find it. They just no one in the media is questioning surveillance. I mean, essentially.
Well, that's why it's Glenn Greenwald, right, at the Guardian.
Right.
You know, but I don't know. It seems to me that here the guy goes to the media, right, and says, "You guys, here's the information. Run with it," right? So you know, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, he's not getting hammered by the Guardian.
No, right. But he's getting hammered by the New York Times and every little podunk newspaper online from here to there who's got some person on staff who's going to write something about him being a traitor. And the one that I was just reading before we started was, had no attribution. There was no person behind this story of traitorous, treasonous behavior because the government's been elected and we all agreed to this, and why we even bothered about this because we knew about it, and terrorism.
Right.
That's the big thing at the end is, well, no terrorism, or we've stopped that. I mean, it's baffling. It's baffling.
Well, that's a bold move, right? To just to launch an assault in the newspaper against someone, but not have a name on it. That'll show him. I don't know. I do wish that there was, as you say, some way to hold up a good example of someone who wasn't immediately vilified.
Well, I'm only vaguely familiar with Daniel Ellsberg, but did he have to suffer through that? I mean, it seemed like with him it was something that the public was after anyway. They wanted the war to stop, so he ended up supporting what people wanted in general. I don't know.
Right. Maybe we'll send him a if he'll come talk to us.
Yeah, he might.
Right? He's got some time on his hands, hasn't he?
Well, I think he's camping out at Manning's trial at the moment.
Right. Maybe we can see if we can get an uplink from there.
Right. Well, and
after all, he and I went to the same high school. So
well, and I think the Manning case here too is interesting because it's not in the news anymore. That decision on whether he's a hero or villain has been made. Everyone's already decided their angle, and clearly he was doing it because he had sexual identity issues, right? I mean, it's bizarre, the angles that they keep coming up with to discredit the actions. They're not looking at the action, they're looking at some context that they're trying to create.
Yeah, I don't know if there was... there was a trial, right, for Ellsberg?
I don't know enough about it.
Yeah, there was. So, yeah, certainly.
Well, yeah, did he spend some time in jail?
Well, it looks like there was a trial and mistrial.
Okay.
So, we can spend some time reading about Daniel Ellsberg before we invite him on. But clearly it seems to me that, people spent quite some time working to discredit him. There's some pretty clear evidence that he was not sort of universally beloved. Certainly the administration was not too happy with his behavior. But but I also think that it was very different. I mean, it was a very different media time, right? So it seems to me that it'd be interesting to see what would have happened, with Ellsberg in a more contemporary time with the 24-hour media cycle and the endless desire to have something to say about what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I think
I don't think he had a great time of it.
Right.
I actually don't think we'll find anyone who did.
I don't think so either. I think because whistleblowers are working against very large organizations usually who have a lot of influence. So I think that probably is enough for today. We've talked pretty extensively, and I think I wonder if there's anyone coming to the Hero Roundtable that can talk on this. I might have to push some people, but I think it's a topic worth discussing.
Yeah. No, I think so too. I think it's really interesting because, you know, at train people to think, you know, about what their responsibilities are and how they, you know, how they ought to act when something sort of, you know, either falls in their lap or, you know, and they feel like they, you know, they can't do anything else. This is one of those questions of what kind of resources are available to you. Can you make a really hard decision, especially given the intense pressure against doing the right thing?
Yeah, yeah, and I would say, I mean, I would urge people who have made a decision that this guy is not a hero to think about if they would want someone to speak out when they saw an issue at their kid's school, or if or at the train station, or whatever it might be. That what you know, how do you extrapolate this out? Is it never okay, or is this a specific incident that you think that there's an issue with?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's I don't know. For me, it's kind of all of this is kind of sad. It's
Yep.
sad because of the reactions that we're seeing. It's also sad because of the way people are talking or thinking about heroism and responsibility and doing the right thing. And people are so quick to abandon this idea, you know, that there is a right thing to do, and that if you feel compelled to do it, you know, and you face the consequences and so on, you take a risk, people then say, well, you know, I just don't like that, so, you know, this is, we're going to focus on how this is clearly criminal. Yeah, it's, I don't know, I feel like it's a real miss for those of us talking about heroism. It's sad that we've been, in some sense, on the outside of this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, maybe next week we'll have some more information that we could consider in the conversation. See if anyone stands out as having said something thoughtful on the whole experience.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe the New York Times will call you, Matt, and ask you to do one of their 300-word room for debates.
We can only hope.
There you go. Well, thanks, Matt. I'm glad that we were able to do this, and we'll talk again soon.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.